Most people are living on a razor's edge, just one missed paycheck away from disaster and drowning in debt that feels like an unstoppable avalanche. This financial stress isn't just a math problem. It's the #1 cause of divorce and is actively stealing the peace your family deserves. Dave Ramsey's Complete Guide to Money proves that winning with money is 80% behavior and only 20% head knowledge, providing a proven roadmap through the baby steps to get you from broke to wealthy. From crushing debt with the debt snowball to building a legacy of generous giving, these common sense principles will finally make your money behave. Stop wondering where your money went and start telling it where to go. Listen, 10 lessons to transform your financial future today.
You know, it is just incredibly sobering when you look at the actual statistics, right? Like how families are really living right now.
Really, it's terrifying.
Yeah, and when you examine the economic landscape, the cultural norm in North America is, well, it's to be completely broke.
Right, like that's just accepted as normal now.
Exactly. It's considered entirely normal to have maxed out credit cards, a car payment you can barely afford, and student loans hanging over your head for decades.
And literally zero savings in the bank to catch you when life inevitably happens.
Right. So today, we're going to walk you through a completely different paradigm. Our mission for this deep dive is to curate this expansive, life-changing financial handbook into highly actionable insights.
Because we are going to teach you how to be weird.
Yes. Because if normal means being stressed, overwhelmed, and entirely broke, you absolutely want to be weird.
And being weird starts with, completely changing how you view the problem. Which brings us to our first point, lesson 1. Winning with money is 80% behavior.
I love this one.
Yeah, let's unpack this right out of the gate, because this foundational premise honestly flips how most of us think about personal finance completely on its head.
It really does.
Right. From the time we are in school, we're taught to think of money as like an advanced math problem.
Oh, for sure. We think it's all about addition, subtraction, compound interest rates.
Complex amortization schedules, all of that.
Yeah. But reading through these sources, the reality is that the math of money is actually incredibly simple.
Right. Like a 5th grader can do the math of spending less than they earn.
Exactly. It's the daily, minute-by-minute execution that trips us up.
Yeah. Personal finance is only 20% head knowledge.
And the other 80% is purely behavior. And no one embodies this realization more starkly than the author of the source material himself.
Oh, Dave's personal origin story?
Yeah, it provides the perfect illustration of this exact phenomenon. In his 20s, he was the absolute wonder kid of his local real estate market.
Right. By the time he was 26, he had built up a $4 million real estate portfolio.
Which is wild. He and his wife were living the high life.
Yeah.
Exotic vacations, luxury cars, fancy jewelry, the works.
But it was all a fragile house of cards, wasn't it?
Oh, entirely. Propped up on a massive mountain of short-term debt. He wasn't building true wealth. He was just playing a high-stakes game of leverage.
And then the economic winds changed, the banks got nervous, and they called the notes.
Yeah, they decided to knock him off that mountain, and the whole thing came crashing down.
Into an avalanche of foreclosures, lawsuits, and eventually total bankruptcy.
He lost everything. And he describes a deeply vivid, rock-bottom moment of standing in the shower.
Oh, that part of the book is so intense.
It is. The water is so hot, it was almost burning his face, but he was so numb he couldn't even feel it.
Just crying, completely overwhelmed with dread.
Right, dread about what creditors he had to face that day and, how he's going to feed his toddler.
Wow.
And that excruciating moment forced him to realize something profound. His financial disaster wasn't because he didn't know how to add and subtract.
Right. I mean, he had a degree in finance.
Exactly. He knew the math perfectly well. It was his behavior. He had played a risky game of leveraging debt because of greed and impatience, and he lost.
And later, when he started counseling other people who were facing bankruptcy, he realized that just giving them a mathematical budget on a piece of paper...
It didn't work.
Yeah. They would leave his office, feel emotionally overwhelmed by their reality, and go right back to their old coping habits.
Because math alone cannot fix a behavioral problem.
That leads to one of my absolute favorite comparisons in the text. He realized that financial counseling needed to look less like a sterile math class and more like Weight Watchers.
That analogy is so good.
Right. Think about it. Weight Watchers doesn't sell a secret magic food.
No.
There is no revolutionary calorie-burning pill that defies physics. People lose weight on that program because they know they have to go to a group meeting on Tuesday night.
And physically step on a scale in front of other human beings.
Exactly. It's the accountability, the emotional support, and the behavioral tracking that gives them the willpower to walk past the donuts in the grocery store.
It is a brilliant analogy because we all know how to lose weight, mathematically speaking.
Eat fewer calories than you burn.
Right, an incredibly simple equation. But executing that equation is brutally hard because it requires daily discipline and a fundamental change in behavior.
And money operates on the exact same psychological wavelength.
Yes, we know we should spend less than we make. We know we shouldn't put a vacation on a credit card.
But we choose to do it anyway.
Because the problem isn't a lack of academic understanding, it's a lack of behavioral execution.
But let's be honest, changing our behavior is physically and emotionally painful.
Oh, absolutely.
The author uses this vivid, kind of gross but totally accurate analogy of a baby sitting in a poopy diaper.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
You try to change the baby and they cry, scream, and resist. Why? Because the baby is thinking, sure, it stinks, but it's warm and it's mine.
That is so true. People defend their financial messes in the exact same way. We get incredibly defensive of our chaotic lives, even when it is clearly destroying our peace.
But I have to push back slightly here, or at least challenge how we frame this. Do you think we deliberately rely on complex financial math, like spending hours searching for the perfect mutual fund algorithm?
Or building a massive spreadsheet to maximize our credit card airline points.
Yeah. Do we use that just as an excuse, like a sophisticated smokescreen to avoid looking in the mirror and actually changing our daily spending habits?
That is a profound observation, and behavioral economists would say the answer is absolutely yes.
Really?
Yeah, people use financial complexity as a sophisticated defense mechanism. Changing your behavior requires you to look in the mirror and admit, I am the problem. My lack of discipline is why we are broke.
Wow, that is a terrifying, emotionally difficult step for anyone to take.
It attacks your ego. It is infinitely easier to blame the macroeconomic environment or the Federal Reserve or to say, I just need a more sophisticated wealth manager.
Rather than admit you lack the discipline to stop leasing cars you can't afford and eating at restaurants 5 nights a week.
Exactly. The math is simple, but destroying your own ego to admit you are the problem is the hardest thing you will ever do.
So, if we acknowledge that our own flawed human behavior is the primary obstacle, we clearly need a simple, foolproof system to follow.
We need absolute rigid guardrails, so our behavior doesn't derail us the second we get stressed or see a targeted ad on Instagram.
Which brings us to the roadmap. Lesson 2. Follow the proven baby steps roadmap. If you are sitting there listening to this, realizing you are broke, overwhelmed, and that your behavior needs to radically change.
You need more than just a vague, inspirational goal to be wealthy. You need turn-by-turn directions from point A to point B.
And that is exactly what the 7 baby steps provide. They are a literal, sequential, chronological map.
Let's just list them out to give you the overarching framework of the journey. Step 1 is to save a $1,000 beginner emergency fund.
Okay, step 1. Got it.
Step 2 is to pay off all your debt except your house using the debt snowball. Step 3 is to save a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses.
That's a big one.
Yeah. Step 4 is to invest 15% of your household income into retirement. Step 5 is college funding for your kids. Step 6 is to pay off your home early. And finally, step 7 is to build wealth and give.
The thing that jumps out to me is the sequential nature of it. Like, why not do them all at once?
Because of the way human attention works. The reason these steps work is entirely due to singular focus and priority.
You cannot tackle everything at once.
No, you can't. One of the biggest financial mistakes middle-class people make is trying to pay off their student loans while contributing to a 401k while prepaying the mortgage.
While trying to build an emergency fund while saving for a vacation.
It diffuses your energy. It's like the old saying, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
Exactly. If you try to do it all simultaneously, you make a millimeter of progress in 10 different directions.
You don't feel any tangible momentum.
You get exhausted and you inevitably quit.
Yeah.
The baby steps force you to pour all of your attention, energy, and passion into one singular target at a time.
And when you hit a target with that much focused intensity, it shatters.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Let's zoom in on that very first target, just saving a $1,000 beginner emergency fund. The text notes that if your income is extremely low, say under $20,000 a year, you can cut this to $500.
But for most people, the goal is $1,000. And the mandate is to do it fast, like within 30 days.
Have a garage sale, work overtime, deliver pizzas, eat nothing but rice and beans.
Do whatever it takes legally and morally to get $1,000 in the bank.
But reading this source material, what struck me is how agonizing this single, seemingly small step is for so many people.
It really is.
Because for a lot of folks living paycheck to paycheck, putting $1,000 in the bank and agreeing under no circumstances to touch it.
That forces an immediate, radical lifestyle change.
It does. It introduces the pain of change we just talked about.
It is the moment of truth where you have to decide if you are actually willing to sacrifice to win. And let's clarify what an emergency actually is, because human behavior loves to rationalize.
Oh, definitely.
Text is very clear. A new leather sofa on sale is not an emergency.
Christmas happening in December is not an emergency. It happens at the same time every year. You should plan for it.
Right. The transmission blowing out on your only car to get to work?
Yeah.
That is a true emergency. A trip to the urgent care for your kid. That is an emergency.
So this $1,000 is just a buffer.
It's designed to catch you so that when life happens, and life will happen, you don't have to reach for a credit card and dig yourself deeper into the hole.
It's a psychological safety net as much as a financial one. Because once that buffer is in place, you stop panicking about every flat tire.
You breathe a little easier.
And that mental clarity prepares you to directly attack the monster in the room, which is lesson 3. Kill your debt with the debt snowball.
Now, this is where it gets intense. Once you have your $1,000 saved, the roadmap says you must stop everything else, literally every other financial goal, and focus solely on your debt.
The mechanics of the debt snowball are brilliant, but they are incredibly controversial.
Very.
You list every single debt you have, except for your primary house mortgage. You list them in order from the smallest balance to the largest balance.
And you ignore the interest rates entirely.
That last part is where everyone gets tripped up.
Oh, absolutely. You pay the minimum payments on everything to keep the creditors at bay, but you take every spare dollar you can squeeze out of your life, and you attack that smallest debt with a vengeance.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because my brain is screaming.
Go for it.
Every finance professor in the country, every math nerd, every financial blogger will tell you to pay off the highest interest rate first.
Mathematically, yes.
Mathematically, attacking the 24% credit card saves you the most money over time compared to paying off a 0% medical bill. Why on earth would we intentionally ignore the interest rates? It feels like a massive contradiction to good, logical financial sense.
It absolutely contradicts standard math. But remember our first lesson.
That winning is 80% behavior.
Right. If you were doing math, you wouldn't have credit card debt in the first place. The problem with paying off the highest interest rate first is behavioral.
Okay, how so?
Usually, your highest interest rate is attached to a massive balance, like a $50,000 student loan or a $15,000 credit card. If you follow the math, you throw an extra $200 at it for 6 months. The balance drops to $13,800.
And you look at it, you feel like you've made absolutely zero progress.
Exactly. You get discouraged and you give up. You say, this is impossible. Let's just go out to eat.
So the debt snowball is entirely about behavior modification and manufacturing psychological momentum.
Yes, it's exactly like playing a video game.
If you start a brand new game at level 1 and you immediately walk into the final boss arena, you are going to get absolutely crushed.
You'll get frustrated, and you'll drop the controller and never play again.
You have to defeat the low-level minions first.
When you pay off that annoying $300 medical bill or that $500 store credit card, you get an immediate rush of dopamine.
You cross it off the list. You gain the emotional momentum and the experience points required to take on the next biggest boss.
And then the magic happens when that first debt is gone. You take the money you were paying on it, and you add it to the minimum payment of the next debt.
The payment grows like a snowball rolling down a mountain, gathering snow until it becomes an unstoppable avalanche of cash flow attacking your largest debts.
Precisely. The psychological victory overrides the mathematical inefficiency. But to make this snowball roll fast enough to actually work, to keep you from losing interest over time, you have to employ what the text calls gazelle intensity.
Gazelle intensity. That's a profound metaphor drawn from the Book of Proverbs, right?
Yes, which says to deliver yourself from debt like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter. The author was watching a nature documentary and saw a cheetah stalking a herd of gazelles.
The cheetah is the fastest mammal on dry land, capable of going from 0 to 45 miles per hour in a few leaps.
But the gazelle survives almost every time. Why?
Because the gazelle runs for its absolute life.
It twists, it turns, it outmaneuvers the cheetah. To get out of debt, you cannot casually stroll. You cannot just kind of want it. You have to run like you were being hunted.
Because the credit card companies, the student loan providers, and the banks are hunting you. They want your income.
And gazelle intensity means making hard, sometimes deeply unpopular choices.
For example, the text advocates temporarily stopping all of your 401k retirement contributions while you are in this step, even if you get an employer match.
Yes.
Now that makes me hyperventilate. You are literally turning down free money from your employer. How can you justify that?
It is the most heavily debated piece of advice in the book. But the logic makes sense when you view it through the lens of risk and focus. When you are in debt, you are in a state of financial emergency.
If you are standing in a burning house, you don't casually check your stock portfolio.
You put out the fire. By stopping the retirement contributions, you free up hundreds of dollars of actual liquid cash flow every single month to throw at the debt.
The goal is to use that massive influx of cash to get out of debt as fast as humanly possible, usually within 18 to 24 months.
You aren't pausing retirement forever, just for a short, intense sprint.
But to have that kind of intensity, to actually find that extra cash to throw at the debt, you have to stop wondering where your money went at the end of the month.
You need absolute control over your income.
Which naturally leads to lesson 4. Give every dollar a name. This is also known as the zero-based budget.
Yes, you cannot win with money by being passive. Currency is called currency because it flows. If you don't actively direct your money, it will simply flow right through your fingers and into someone else's pocket.
The mechanical rule of the zero-based budget is simple yet profound. Income minus expenses must equal exactly 0 before the month even begins.
You sit down, you write down your total expected income at the top of the page. Then you list every single expense, including your savings, your debt snowball payments, giving, groceries, everything.
You spend every dollar on paper, on purpose, until you hit 0.
If you have $200 left over at the bottom of the page, you aren't done.
You have to go back and assign that money to a category. Give every single dollar a name, a specific job to do before the month starts.
And when you are building this budget, it's especially if you are in financial distress, your very first priority must be what the text calls the 4 walls.
Before you pay Visa, before you pay your student loans, you must secure your food, your shelter, your clothing, and your transportation.
This is a critical psychological survival tactic. If you have food in your belly, a roof over your head, basic clothes on your back, and a way to get to work to make more money, you will live to fight another day.
The author is adamant, never let a screaming debt collector on the phone pressure you into paying them before you feed your kids or pay your mortgage.
You secure the 4 walls first.
Okay, so once the 4 walls are secure and we have our zero-based budget on paper, how do we actually stick to it? Because spreadsheets don't stop you from swiping a card at Target.
No, they don't. The book champions Grandma's method, the envelope system.
You look at categories where you chronically overspend, usually groceries, restaurants, and clothing.
If you budget $400 for groceries, you literally go to the bank, withdraw $400 in physical cash, and put it in a paper envelope marked groceries.
When you go to the store, you only use that cash. And when the envelope is empty, you are done buying groceries.
But I have to stop here.
Okay.
It is the modern era. Nobody uses cash anymore. I use Apple Pay for literally everything. Isn't carrying physical envelopes of hundreds of dollars incredibly impractical, maybe even a little archaic?
It feels archaic, but it is deeply rooted in neuroscience. The reason the envelope system works in a digital age is exactly because digital payments are too easy.
When you use Apple Pay or a credit card, the transaction is frictionless. Your brain does not register loss.
But studies in behavioral economics show that when you physically hand over crisp $20 bills, the pain receptors in your brain actually fire.
It physically hurts to part with cash.
The friction forces you to evaluate the purchase, and the envelope provides an absolute boundary. When a cash is gone, it's gone.
You can't accidentally overdraw a paper envelope. You don't dip into the rent money to buy a steak.
Yeah.
You eat beans from the pantry until the end of the month.
That makes sense. It's about introducing intentional friction. And people are so afraid of budgets, they view it as a straitjacket that removes all their freedom and spontaneity.
But reading this, I realized a budget is actually a permission slip to spend on purpose.
Yeah.
It removes the guilt.
If you budget $50 for pizza, you can eat that pizza completely guilt-free because you know it isn't stealing from your electric bill. It's part of the plan.
Exactly. But the fear of the budget is real because it forces you to face reality. There's an incredible anecdote in the sources about a man who finally did a written budget and realized he was spending $1,200 a month just eating out at restaurants.
Wow.
He literally told the author, I now know why I don't have a retirement fund. I've been eating it. The clarity is terrifying but necessary.
But here's a practical question. A zero-based budget sounds great if you get a predictable salaried paycheck every 2 weeks. But what about freelancers, real estate agents, or commission-based salespeople? How do you budget with an irregular income when you don't know what the top line is going to be?
It's a very common hurdle, but an irregular income is actually more of a reason to budget, not less. The specific method for this is the prioritized list.
You sit down before the month begins and you list all your expenses in order of absolute survival importance.
Food is number 1, shelter is number 2, utilities number 3, all the way down to the cable bill, the Netflix subscription, or the extra debt payment at the very bottom.
When a freelance check comes in, you simply work your way down the list. You fund the top priorities first.
When the money runs out, you draw a red line on the paper. Anything below that line doesn't get paid until the next check comes in.
It removes the panic because you know the most important things are covered.
And what's amazing is that once you start tracking every single dollar with this zero-based budget, whether you are salaried or freelance, you have this horrifying realization.
You suddenly see exactly how many of your hard-earned dollars are marching straight out the door to Visa, MasterCard, and the auto lender every single month.
It wakes you up to the toxic reality of our credit culture.
Which is the perfect segue to Lesson 5. Stop using debt as a tool. This lesson really deconstructs the environment we live in.
We have been sold the greatest marketing lie in modern history, the idea that debt is a helpful financial tool, a service designed to help you build prosperity and bridge the gap to a better life.
It is not a service. Debt is a highly marketed, incredibly profitable product.
The credit card industry alone generates over $150 billion in gross revenue a year. They have entire skyscrapers filled with marketing experts, psychologists, and data scientists whose sole job is to figure out how to keep you chained to monthly payments.
They want a percentage of your labor for the rest of your life.
And the crowning achievement of their marketing, the absolute masterpiece of their brainwashing, is the FICO score.
We are taught from high school that a good credit score is the ultimate measure of financial success. You brag about an 800 credit score.
But the text completely deconstructs this myth. A FICO score is nothing more than an I love debt score.
Let's break down the actual mechanical calculation of a FICO score to prove this.
35% of the score is based on your debt payment history. 30% is based on your debt levels or credit utilization.
15% is the duration of your debt history. 10% is the type of debt you have. And the final 10% is new debt inquiries.
Notice what is missing from that calculation.
Everything that actually matters. Your income, 0%. Your savings account balance, 0%.
Your real estate assets, your retirement funds, your net worth, all count for absolutely zero.
You could inherit $10 million tomorrow, and your FICO score wouldn't go up a single point. You could be making $500,000 a year, and if you don't borrow money, your score drops.
Yes. There is a deeply revealing story from Dave Ramsey in the text. After living 20 years completely debt-free, having built a massive net worth, he tried to pull his own credit score.
He went online, and the system returned an error message.
It basically said there wasn't enough debt activity to generate a score, and added a strange automated note saying there was no indication of being deceased.
To the credit bureaus, if you don't interact with debt, you might as well be dead.
I always compare the FICO score to a casino loyalty card. If you walk into a casino and flash a shiny platinum VIP card, it doesn't mean you're a winner.
It doesn't mean you're wealthy.
It just proves that you spend a lot of time playing the house's game. You interact with their machines. And in the credit industry, just like in Vegas, the house always wins.
It is a phenomenal, accurate analogy. And the myth of debt as a sophisticated tool extends far beyond credit cards. Take car leases, for instance.
We are told by financial columnists that leasing a car is what sophisticated, financially savvy people do so they don't tie up their capital in a depreciating asset.
But the text reveals the mathematical reality a car lease is actually the most expensive way to operate a motor vehicle.
It is effectively a long-term rental agreement with an exorbitant built-in interest rate called a money factor.
If a dealer sells you a car for cash, they make a marginal profit, maybe a few $100s. If they sell you a loan, they make more because of financing kickbacks.
But if they can trap you in a lease, their profit absolutely skyrockets, often over $1,300 per car. They push leases aggressively because it makes them rich, not you.
And don't even get me started on payday loans.
The text calls them the scum of the financial earth. and for good reason.
They are predatory lending at its worst, targeting the most vulnerable people and charging effective interest rates of up to 1,800%.
We have to fundamentally reject this culture and return to the ancient biblical wisdom the author quotes, "The borrower is slave to the lender."
When you owe money, you are not free.
But realizing all of this, waking up from the matrix of debt culture, cutting up your credit cards, and suddenly attempting to live on a strict zero-based budget, that is an incredibly stressful, jarring transition for any individual.
And if you are married and you are trying to make these radical, gazelle-intense changes while your spouse is still trying to live normally, your household is going to implode.
You can't run with gazelle intensity if your partner is dragging an anchor.
Which is exactly why we need Lesson 6. Teamwork in marriage is mandatory.
As we touched on in the beginning, money fights and money problems are the #1 cause of divorce in North America.
When couples are not on the same page with their finances, they are destined for deep relational trouble because money isn't just about math.
Money represents our power, our priorities, our deepest fears, our dreams, and our core value systems. When you argue about a credit card bill, you aren't arguing about math. You are arguing about values.
The text highlights that men and women, and we are speaking in broad statistical generalizations here, but they are relevant patterns, tend to view money very differently.
Men often view money as a scorecard. It is tied to their ego and their perception of providing. When financial problems hit, men often lose self-esteem, they withdraw, and they feel like they're literally losing the game of life.
Women, on the other hand, tend to view money as a measure of security. When there are money problems, women don't just feel like they are losing a game. They experience actual visceral terror and fear because the safety net for their family is threatened.
If you don't understand those underlying emotional currents, you will never successfully communicate about the budget.
Beyond those gender differences, every marriage typically consists of two distinct financial personalities, the nerd and the free spirit. I absolutely love this breakdown.
The nerd naturally loves spreadsheets, organization, calculators, and control. Doing the zero-based budget makes them feel alive. It makes them feel like they're taking care of their family.
The free spirit is entirely different. They are less detailed, they don't care about the cells in the spreadsheet, they love spontaneity, and when they look at the nerd's highly detailed budget, they don't feel cared for, they feel suffocated and controlled.
The thought of a monthly budget meeting feels like a prison sentence to them.
But the author emphasizes that both personalities are vital for a healthy financial life. If two nerds get married, they'll count their pennies, save everything, never go on vacation, and die of absolute boredom.
If two free spirits get married, they'll have an absolute blast, buy everything they want, and eventually get foreclosed on. They desperately need each other's strengths.
So the text proposes a formal solution, the budget committee meeting. Once a month, the husband and wife must sit down as a two-person committee. And there are strict, non-negotiable rules for this meeting.
Let's lay down the law for the nerds first. Rule #1 for the nerd. You prepare the initial draft of the budget, you bring it to the meeting, you state your case, and then you shut up.
You cannot dominate the meeting. You cannot weaponize the spreadsheet to beat your spouse into submission. It's a 17-minute summit, not a 3-hour weekend lecture.
And the rules for the free spirit are equally strict because they have to step up. Rule #1. You must show up to the meeting physically and mentally. No checking your phone.
Rule #2. You must actively participate and give mature, thoughtful input.
Rule #3, and this is crucial for the psychology of ownership. The free spirit must change at least one thing on the nerd's draft.
If you don't change anything, it remains the nerd's budget and you will resent it. By changing something, adding $50 to the clothing category, or suggesting a different debt to attack you, you take ownership of it, and it magically transforms into the family's budget.
And the ultimate rule for the free spirit, you can never, ever use the cop-out phrase, "whatever you want to do, honey." That is an abdication of adult responsibility.
But what if you have a reluctant spouse? I hear this all the time. One person wakes up, realizes they are broke, wants to change, but the other partner is completely resistant. How do you get them on board?
The book explicitly says, do not nag, do not whine, and do not beat them over the head with financial books or podcasts.
My favorite tactic from the text is the Valentine's approach. You look at your spouse and say, "Honey, I am so stressed about our future. The most romantic thing you could possibly do for me is to sit down and work on this budget with me."
On a scale of 1 to 10, dinner and a movie is a 3. But working together to get us out of debt and secure our future is a 9.
It frames the budget not as a restriction on their fun, but as an act of love, vulnerability, and partnership.
And we should note, for the single listeners out there, this lesson still applies to you, just in a different format. You are the sole committee member, which means you can make decisions quickly, but you lack a sounding board.
Therefore, you must find a strict accountability partner. Not a shopping buddy who enables your bad habits, but someone with some gray hair and financial wisdom who loves you enough to hurt your feelings and tell you when you're making a dumb purchase.
Once a couple or a single person with an accountability partner is fully aligned and operating as a united, unbreakable front, they become incredibly powerful.
They stop fighting each other and start fighting the system. They can take that unity out into the marketplace.
This brings us to lesson 7. Master the power of negotiation.
I love this one because it feels like a superpower. The golden rule here is never settle for retail.
Once you are entirely debt-free and you are paying with cold, hard cash that you saved on purpose, you have immense tangible leverage in any transaction.
But we need to define what negotiation actually is because many people are terrified of it. Negotiation isn't about being a jerk or being loud or trying to cheat someone out of their profit.
The text shares a classic psychological illustration called the win-win orange. Two people are arguing fiercely because they both want the exact same orange.
They argue, they yell, and finally they compromise. They cut the orange right down the middle in half.
One person takes their half, eats the fruit, and throws away the peel. The other person takes their half, uses the peel to bake a cake, and throws away the fruit.
It's a brilliant illustration of terrible, ego-driven negotiation. If they had just stopped arguing, communicated, and found out what the other party actually needed, they both could have had 100% of what they wanted.
One could have taken all the fruit, and the other all the peel. That is the essence of true negotiation. It requires patience. It requires listening to understand the vendor's actual needs. Maybe they need cash today to make payroll. Maybe they need to clear inventory.
And most importantly, it requires the absolute, unflinching willingness to walk away.
The walkaway power is everything. Car dealers, for example, know the psychology of the buyer. They know that if you leave the lot without buying, you are probably never coming back.
If you fall in love with a specific car, if you are emotionally attached to a purchase, you lose all your negotiation power. You must maintain emotional detachment.
There is this hilarious but intense anecdote in the book about walkaway power and integrity. Dave Ramsey is at an electronics store. The salesman is aggressively trying to push an extended warranty on him.
Now, Dave passionately hates extended warranties. Mathematically, they're a ripoff, and he tells millions of people on the radio not to buy them.
The salesman, desperate to close the deal and clearly lying, says, "Listen, even Dave Ramsey buys extended warranties. He was in here the other day and bought one. I have the paperwork in the back."
And Dave Ramsey is standing right there in front of him. The salesman didn't recognize him.
Yes. Dave gets absolutely furious because his personal integrity is being attacked. He pulls out his driver's license, shoves it right in the salesman's face and says, "Dave Ramsey does not buy extended warranties." And then he turns around and walks out of the store.
I love that story because I used to think negotiation was just about being cheap. But pushing back, asking for a better deal, and walking away isn't just a tactic to keep more money in your pocket. It's about maintaining your personal integrity.
You do not do business with liars. You demand fair value for the cash you worked so hard to save.
Exactly. So if we look at the arc of what we've covered, if you budget strictly, if you eradicate debt from your life, and if you negotiate fiercely to save cash on every purchase, you are going to find yourself with a rapidly growing pile of discretionary money at the end of every month.
And the purpose of saving that money isn't just to hoard it under a mattress or leave it in a checking account to get eaten by inflation. It is the raw material required for the next phase of the roadmap.
Which takes us to lesson 8, compound interest. The tortoise always wins. This is where we enter baby step 4, which is investing a full 15% of your gross household income into retirement.
The core message here is that true wealth building is a marathon, not a get-rich-quick sprint. It's about steady, disciplined consistency over decades.
To illustrate the sheer, mind-bending mathematical explosion of compound interest, the text uses the famous story of Ben and Arthur. This perfectly captures the time value of money.
Ben starts investing early at age 19. He puts away just $2,000 a year. He does this for exactly 8 years.
By age 26, he has invested a total of $16,000 out of his own pocket, and then he completely stops adding money. He never puts another dime in.
He just lets that pile sit there and compound at a hypothetical 12% average annual return.
Arthur, on the other hand, waits until he is 27 to start. He invests the exact same $2,000 a year, but he does it every single year for 38 years, all the way until he is 65.
Arthur invests a total of $76,000 out of his own pocket.
Okay, so Arthur put in nearly 5 times as much of his own money. But who wins at retirement?
Jen wins. And not just by a little bit. By a massive landslide. Even though Ben only put in $16,000 compared to Arthur's $76,000, Ben's 8-year head start allowed the magic of compound interest to do the heavy lifting.
The interest earned interest, and that interest earned interest. Ben beats Arthur by over $700,000 at retirement.
The math of time is staggering. The book points out that if you just squeeze $100 a month out of your budget, which is essentially skipping one nice dinner out, or canceling cable and invest it consistently from age 25 to 65 at average market returns, you will retire a millionaire.
Over $1.1 million from just $100 a month.
But to achieve those returns safely, you must adhere to the KISS principle for investing. Keep it simple, stupid.
The financial industry loves to talk down to people. They use complex, jargon derivatives, options, leveraged ETFs to make you feel inadequate, so you will hand over your money and pay their exorbitant management fees.
The rule is simple. If you cannot easily explain how an investment works to a 12-year-old, you should not put your hard-earned money in it.
And you must diversify. The text uses a great folksy analogy. Investments are like manure. Left in one big pile, it just stinks and kills the grass. But if you spread it around, it helps things grow.
You spread your risk across different types of growth stock, mutual funds growth, growth and income, aggressive growth, and international, so that a single market event in one sector doesn't wipe you out.
So mechanically, how do we actually execute this 15% rule? The book lays out a very specific, optimized order of operations for tax efficiency.
First, you invest in your company's 401k only up to the point of the employer match. Let's say they match up to 3%. You put in 3%. That match is a 100% return on your money. It is free money. Take it.
Second, you stop funding the 401k and you fully fund a Roth IRA for you and your spouse up to the maximum legal limit.
And we need to explain why the Roth is mathematically superior for the middle class. A traditional 401k is pre-tax, meaning you get a tax break today, but when you retire and pull the millions of dollars out, the government taxes all of it.
A Roth IRA is funded with post-tax dollars. You pay taxes on the seed today, but the entire harvest, the hundreds of thousands of dollars of growth, is completely tax-free at retirement. The government cannot touch it.
It is the ultimate legal tax shelter.
Now, third, if you have matched the 401k, maxed out the Roth IRAs, and you still haven't hit 15% of your total household income, you go back and put the rest into the traditional 401k until you hit that 15% mark.
If you do this steadily, month after month, year after year, ignoring the panic of the news cycle, acting like the tortoise racing the hare, millionaire status is practically guaranteed.
But this predictable success raises an incredibly important defensive question. Once you have diligently worked the baby steps, paid off your debt, and built this massive, fragile nest egg of wealth, your profile changes.
You suddenly become a very large target. You become a target for Murphy's Law, for car accidents, for catastrophic illness, and for lawsuits. You must build an impenetrable defensive wall around your wealth.
This moves us right into lesson 9. Buy insurance to transfer risk, not for investing.
The entire sole purpose of insurance and a financial plan is to transfer catastrophic financial risk from your fragile shoulders to the deep, multi-billion-dollar pockets of an insurance company. That's it.
You pay them a small premium, and they take on the risk of a loss that would otherwise bankrupt you. And the golden rule here is to never mix your insurance products with your investment products.
Specifically, the text strongly warns almost angrily against cash value life insurance, often known as whole life insurance. This is a massive trap.
It is. These products try to combine a death benefit with a savings account, and mechanically, they perform abysmally at both.
They are incredibly expensive. The premiums are vastly higher than standard insurance. The savings or cash value portion typically yields atrocious returns, often around 1–2%.
And the most shocking mechanical truth that agents rarely emphasize when you die, the insurance company usually keeps the cash value you built up and only pays your family the face value of the policy.
It is a terrible product. The author dictates that you should exclusively buy cheap, level-term life insurance, usually 10 to 12 times your annual income, to purely protect your family against the loss of your income if you die.
And all your investing should be done entirely separately in the mutual funds and Roth IRAs we just discussed, where you control the money and get market returns.
What's brilliant about this entire system is how the baby steps interact with your defensive insurance strategy to save you even more money. Let's look at baby step 3, the fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses.
Let's say you have $15,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account. Because you have that cash, you no longer need expensive, low deductibles on your car or health insurance.
You don't need a $250 deductible.
Yeah.
You can confidently raise your auto deductible to $1,000. Because if you get into a fender bender, it's not a crisis. You can just write a check from your emergency fund.
Raising your deductibles transfers some of the minor risk back to you, which drastically lowers your monthly premiums, freeing up even more cash in your budget to build wealth.
But we must emphasize that insurance isn't just about spreadsheets and math. It is about the profound moral responsibility of protecting your family from the devastation of your own death or disability.
The author introduces a deeply emotional concept called the legacy drawer.
It is a single, perfectly organized, fireproof drawer or file box in your home that contains everything your spouse or children would possibly need if you were to pass away suddenly.
It holds your digital passwords, your updated wills, your term life insurance policies, contact information for your financial advisors, and clear step-by-step instructions.
And a love note, that detail really hit me hard. You put a handwritten love note in there for your grieving spouse.
Because when you die, your family is going to be emotionally devastated. The last thing they should have to do while planning a funeral is navigate a chaotic financial scavenger hunt, trying to find bank accounts, guess passwords, or figure out how to pay the mortgage.
The legacy drawer is the ultimate act of love. It says, even though I'm gone, I planned for you, I protected you, and everything is going to be okay financially. It transforms insurance from a boring defensive tactic into a beautiful act of care.
It is a beautiful sentiment, and it shows that true financial peace extends far beyond your own lifetime, which leads us to the pinnacle of the entire journey.
When you have no debt, a massive emergency fund, millions in retirement, and your family is fully protected, what is the ultimate purpose of having all this money?
Lesson 10. Live like no one else to give like no one else. We finally arrive at baby step 7, build wealth and give.
This is the payoff. After years of gazelle intensity, rice and beans, and strict budgeting, you reach the top of the mountain. But how you handle the view from the top dictates your legacy.
Many people suffer from what the text calls the great misunderstanding. They believe that to accumulate wealth, you must be inherently selfish. They think you must hoard every dollar and hold on to your money with a tight, clenched fist.
But the author illustrates a powerful paradox. If you clench your fist tightly around a $1,000 bill, yes, you won't lose it. It is safe. But your hand is closed.
You have put up a physical and spiritual wall that prevents you from receiving anything else, and it completely prevents you from extending that hand to help anyone else.
The paradox is that true wealth and the true joy of wealth only comes from opening your hand.
But opening your hand requires a massive psychological shift. You have to transition from viewing yourself as the owner of your money to being a manager of it.
Dave Ramsey tells this amazing story about the accounting employee at his own company. His company was making a massive corporate charitable donation to a ministry. The accountant was tasked with physically writing the check.
It was a huge sum, lots of zeros, more money than she made in a year. Dave asked her if it was hard or stressful for her to write a check that big.
She said no, it didn't faze her at all. Why? Because it wasn't her money. She was just managing it according to the owner's wishes.
When we realize that we don't truly take any of this wealth with us when we die, that we are merely stewards or managers of the resources entrusted to us during our short lifetime giving, becomes an act of immense joy, completely free of pain or stress.
But we have to remember the proper sequential order of this generosity. There is a classic fable referenced in the text about the goose and the golden eggs.
Some people feel guilty taking care of themselves, so they try to give everything away while they're still deeply in debt, and they end up bankrupt, unable to help anyone.
In this analogy, you are the goose. The wealth you create, the cash flow you generate, are the golden eggs. If you don't feed the goose, if you don't secure your own four walls, aggressively pay off your debt and fund your retirement, the goose will starve and die.
You must unapologetically take care of your own household first. You build a strong, healthy goose so that for the rest of your life, you can continually give away massive golden eggs to your church, to charities, to single moms, and to orphans.
It's just incredible to step back and look at the entire arc of this journey. We started this deep dive with a guy crying in a hot shower because he was drowning in debt, relying on credit cards, and about to lose everything.
And we end with a proven sequential system that empowers you to build so much wealth that you can write life-changing checks to people in need just for the sheer joy of it.
It proved that taking absolute control of your behavior doesn't just fix a temporary math problem. It literally changes your family tree for generations to come.
And that idea of the next generation brings us to a final, provocative thought that really builds on everything we've discussed today. We've talked extensively about the intense discipline, the gazelle intensity, and the behavioral changes required to build this wealth.
But what happens when you pass it on? If you successfully execute these baby steps, you will likely leave behind a massive inheritance. But wealth, without the discipline that created it, can be incredibly destructive.
The burden of inheriting millions of dollars without having had to exercise the no muscle, without having had to live on a zero-based budget, can actually ruin the next generation.
It raises a fascinating challenge. As you are building this wealth, how are you actively transferring the values and the behavior to your children, not just the money? Because giving them the golden eggs without teaching them how to care for the goose might be the most dangerous thing you could do.
Thank you for watching. Please like out, share, subscribe, follow up in next video.